Constantin Brâncoveanu (1654 August 15, 1714) was Prince of Wallachia between 1688 and 1714. Biography. Ascension. A descendant of the Craiovestiboia family and related to Matei Basarab. Brâncoveanu was born at the estate of Brâncoveanu and raised in the house of his uncle, Stolnik Constantin Cantacuzino. He soon became involved in the conflict between Constantin and Serban Cantacuzino, and rose to the throne after the latter died in mysterious circumstances. He was initially supported by Constantin Cantacuzino, but the two ended up facing each other in a violent competition. Cantacuzino was exiled, and began advocating his son Stefan's candidacy to the throne, while competing with Brâncoveanu from the support of the Ottoman Empire, Wallachia's overlord. Death and sanctification in Eastern Orthodoxy. The circumstances and facts of Constantin's death are history. His sanctification recognized in all the Eastern Orthodox Church. Dragos Ungurianu, a specialist at the National Patrimony Institute, makes a clear distinction between the holiness status of Prince Brâncoveanu and the same quality of some European monarchs who haven't suffered a martyr's death. Brâncoveanu was canonized for his and his son's martyrdom, just like the Christians' martyrdom in ancient Rome, killed for the faith in Christ, and just like other Christian martyrs, Brâncoveanu had a choice between his and his son's death and the denial of Christ. His character, the nature of his relations with the others, the unexpected events of life brought against his will, in this strange, even shocking situation for the year 1714. On the 15th of August 1714, St. Mary Feast, when Constantin Brâncoveanu also celebrated his 60th birthday, he and his 4 sons, among with Councillor Ionash, were brought in front of Sultan Ahmed III of Turkey. Diplomatical representatives of Austria, Russia, France and England were also present. Here is what history remembers. After all of his fortunes were taken in change of the life of his family, he was asked to renounce at the Orthodox Christian faith. He reportedly said, "Behold, all my fortunes and all I had, I have lost. Let us not lose our souls. Be brave and manly, my beloved. Ignore death. Look at Christ, our Savior, how much has endured for us and with what shameful death has died. Strongly believe in this and do not move, nor do you leave your faith for this life and this world." After this, his 4 sons, Constantin, Stefan, Radu and Matei, and Councillor Ionash were beheaded in front of the father. History records also that the smallest child, Matei, he was so scared after seeing all the bloodbath and heads of his 3 brothers that he started crying, asking his father to let him renounce Christianity and convert to Islam, as Sultan Ahmed III asked in front of all the great powers represented there. At this moment, Constantin Brâncoveanu said, "From our kind nobody lost his faith. It is better to die 1,000 times than to leave your ancient faith just to live few more years on earth." Matei listened and offered his head. After Brâncoveanu was also decapitated, the heads were stabbed with a javelin and shown in a procession. The bodies were left in the front of the gate and later on thrown in the waters of the Bosphorus. Policies. The prince took steps in negotiating anti-Ottoman alliances, first with the Habsburg monarchy, and then with Peter the Great's Russia. Upon the 1710 Russian intervention in Moldavia, the prince contacted Tsar Peter and accepted gifts from the latter, while his rivalry with the Moldavian Prince Dmitry Cantemir prevented a more decisive political move. Instead, Brâncoveanu gathered Wallachian troops in Urlati, near the Moldavian border, awaiting for Russian troops to storm into his country and offer his services to the Tsar, while also readying to join the Ottoman counter-offensive in the event account of a change in fortunes. When several of his boys fled to the Russian camp, the prince saw himself forced to decide in favor of the Ottomans, a risk becoming an enemy of his Ottoman suzerain, and swiftly returned the gifts he had received from the Russians. Such policies were eventually denounced to the Porte. Brâncoveanu was deposed from his throne by Sultan Ahmed III, and brought under arrest to Constantinople, where he was imprisoned in 1714 at the fortress of Yedikul. There he was tortured by the Ottomans, who hoped to locate the immense fortune he had supposedly amassed. He and his 4 sons were beheaded on the same day in August, together with Prince Constantin's faithful friend, her treasurer Anash Vacarescu. According to his secretary, Anton Maria del Chiaro, the heads were then carried on poles through the streets of Constantinople, an episode which caused a great unrest in the city, fearing a rebellion, including from that of the Muslim population, which was outraged by the injustice done to the prince. His sons and his close friend ordered for the bodies to be thrown into the Bosphorus. Christian fishermen took the bodies from the water and buried them at the Wallachia monastery in the city's vicinity. Cultural contributions. Brâncoveanu was a great patron of culture, his achievements being part of the Romanian and world cultural heritage. Under his reign, many Romanian, Greek, Bulgarian, Arabic, Turkish, and Georgian texts were printed after a printing press was established in Bucharest, an institution overseen by Antim the Iberian. In 1694, he founded the Royal Academy of Bucharest. In his religious and laic constructions, Brâncoveanu harmoniously combined in architecture the mural and sculptural painting, the local tradition, the Neo-Byzantine style and the innovative ideas of the Italian Renaissance, giving rise to Brâncoveanu style. The most accomplished and the best preserved example of Brâncoveanu style architecture is Furizi Monastery, inscribed by UNESCO on its list of World Heritage Sites, where Brâncoveanu intended to have his tomb. Other buildings erected by him are Mogasoia Palace Complex, Potlogi Palace, Brâncoveanu Monastery. Such cultural ventures relied on increased taxation, which was also determined by the mounting fiscal pressure of the Ottomans. Legacy. Brâncoveanu left to the secular Romanian spirituality a few fundamental books, printed for the first time in Wallachia, among them, Aristotle's Ethics, The Flower of the Gifts and the Philosophical Examples, the last 2 being translated and printed by Antim Brâncoveanu. The Neo-Romanian style was born from the style of the monasteries, of the houses and of the palaces of Brâncoveanu, and it became, through Ion Mincu and his school, the national style at the time of the affirmation of the cultural identities of the nations of Europe in the beginning of the 20th century. The architectural Brâncoveanu style is found in the churches of the monasteries of Hurizi, Râmnicu Sarat, Doicești and St. George's New Church in Bucharest. Among secular buildings, the style can be found in Mogasoia Palace and the reworked Old Court. The Constantin Brâncoveanu University is located in Pitești, but it also has subsidiaries in Brăila and Râmnicu Vâlcea. In June 1992, the Synod of the Romanian Orthodox Church decreed the sanctification of Constantin Brâncoveanu. His sons Constantin, Radu, Stefan and Matei and Vornicii Anash Vacarescu. Historiography. The intrigue marking Constantin's ascension and reign is reflected in chronicles of the time, which are ideologically divided. Letopocetal Canticuzes gives a bleak account of Serban's rule, as does Chronica Balenor. Radu Grecianus is an official account of Brâncoveanu's rule, and Radu Popescu is adverse to Cantacuzino rulers. Dimitri Cantemir's Historia Hieroglyphica is centered on the clash, and reflects Cantemir's preference for Constantin Cantacuzino, who was also related to Dimitri through marriage. Stefan Cantacuzeno's brief rule saw in turn the downfall of the Cantacuzenos. He and his father were executed by the Ottomans, who saw the solution to the risk of Wallachia-Russian alliances in imposing the rigid system of Phanariot rule. Through his death, Constantin Brâncoveanu became the hero of a series of Romanian folk ballads, as well as being depicted on some of Romania's official coinage. According to the Romanian Orthodox Church, the reason for his and his son's execution was the refusal to give up the Christian faith and convert to Islam. In 1992 the Church declared him, his sons, and Anash saints and martyrs. The feast day is August 16. Quotes. Letopocital Cantacuzes on Constantin Brâncoveanu's relations with the Habsburgs and Ottomans early in his reign. Quote. Then Constantin Voda as well, arriving to his seat in Bucharest, catching news of the Austrians having entered his country and having reached Targa Vista, immediately left his seat, went forth towards Piterea Lui Bridge, setting camp in the river meadow of Platerasti, leaving behind the Ispravnik with orders that when the Austrians were to arrive in Bucharest, he was to provide them with all supplies they would need. Subsequently, upon understanding this, immediately sent a letter to Constantin Voda, inviting him to return to his seat and join in harassing the Turk. Then Constantin Voda, upon understanding this, called as soon as he could the Metropolitan Theodorzy, as well as all his lower and higher boyars, summoning a great council on what was to be done, whereupon some of the boyars vigorously showed themselves to favor Constantin Voda's rejection of the Turks and his joining the Austrians, while another bunch of boyars, foremost Constantin Cantacuzeno, who has been great Stolnik, and Mihai Cantacuzeno, the great spatter, believed this not to constitute good advice, as, were such a thing to happen, the nearby Tartars would immediately arrive with a mighty force in order to enslave and plunder the country, and the Austrians would prove of no help. And immediately they moved spot and went to the village of Rusi, where the princely fish ponds are located. Then came to Dragonești, inviting Constantin Voda to leave Rusi and meet him in Dragonești, showing himself a great friend towards Constantin Voda, asking him in all good faith to teach him what he should do next, and he told all the truth about how his and his troops' arrival had been brought about by the Lizov, and how had boasted that, were to enter the country, all boyars in all country would pay allegiance to, but that this had not in fact happened. Thus Constantin Voda told him the whole truth about how the Tartars wished to enter his country, and threw a major banquet in his honor, and then returned to Bucharest in great fear. And the Tartars, aware of the Austrian presence, wasted no time in raising troops for the Sultan and sent forth messengers to Constantin Voda, telling him that they were to come in the country to fight the Austrians. Thus Constantin Voda, upon hearing news of this, became very saddened, most of all considering the plight of the poor country, and immediately lifted camp and left for Buzău. And when he arrived there, he sent his lady and all her ladies in waiting to the convent, and he rode with a few of his men to meet the Sultan, paying him high allegiance and offering him many gifts. It is then that the Sultan saw that Constantin Voda was not being rebellious, but rather honest servant, and gave him assurance that his country would not be enslaved, and that were instead to meet the Austrians, who were their enemies. Issue. Brâncoveanu and his wife Marica had 7 daughters and 4 sons. Although all of his sons were murdered, many of his daughters had issue. Brâncoveanu's firstborn, Constantin II, also had a son who survived exile and rose to be a Melban. The male line of the Brâncoveanu family became extinguished in 1932, when Grigore Brâncoveanu died without having any children of his own. Yet he adopted a relative and thus passed the family name on. According to a genealogical study, roughly 250 of his bloodline 9 were alive at the middle of the 19th century, amongst them Gheorghe Bibescu and Barbu Sturbe, famous revolutionary Alexandru Ipsilanti, Romanian Prime Ministers Barbu Catargiu, Nicolae Crețulescu, George Manu and Gheorghe Grigă Cantacuzino, Nababul, and historians Dan and Minia Barindii. Bibliography